In 1931, a night on the town was an event, and none more special than to attend the opening of a new Australian picture.
Introducing Mr. Pat Hanna.
Somehow I rather think we are a race who do not like to see ourselves taken too seriously. And I think the caricature of the casual Aussie is faithfully drawn.
But while this was exciting in itself, audiences enjoyed viewing something even more fascinating. A glimpse of themselves. The weekly movie-tone newsreel had a peek at most aspects of Australian life. The dramatic, the comic, the bizarre and the ordinary. This wasn't the romance of feature film. This was the stuff of the everyday. From the start, movie-tone news was an instant success and shown in almost every cinema. It's hard to imagine that not too long ago, a night out at the pictures wasn't complete without the newsreel. For over 3 decades, the drama of life fascinated us. It was made irresistible through the witnessing of moments of danger and instants of human tragedy. The popularity of the newsreels created a new breed of news gatherers, the cameramen, who risked their lives and sometimes lost them getting the camera there. From the turn of the century, newsreels had existed, but only spasmodically, depicting an unmistakable British community living on the fringe of the continent. They captured the moment of federation in 1901, social events and action, but all without sound. Then in 1927, a revolution in the cinema. The talkies. The first human sounds of the newsreel were cries of despair, the Great Depression which had engulfed the world. In Australia, this arrival of sound with pictures brought the voice of austerity and desperation.
Australia is facing today the gravest financial crisis in its history. 2 courses are open to us. On the one side is default, dishonor, and great distress. On the other side, sacrifice with security. Pensioners, wage earners, salaries, those receiving salaries, have all been reduced.
Going after that a ridiculous price, they're better than 3 guineas. It is made from pure beeswax and turpentine. Absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, the finest boot polish. Frivolous! Just what 2 bucks a seed for set up there. Anything you like this,
While life was barely endurable, for those lucky enough to have the price of a ticket, the pictures were a welcome escape from the emptiness of the everyday. It was in this decade Australians became obsessed with images of power, speed, technology, and its advancement. Aviation filled the screens and audiences could share with the privileged few the excitement of early commercial flight. But with flight came the need for risky experimentation in air safety. The weekly news regularly brought desirable glimpses of the risque. And the military experimented in the field. And certain events became newsreel institutions. The Melbourne Cup had the effect of galvanising the nation. It provided a single focus, and while it was a holiday for most, for the competing news companies Movietone and its arch-rival Cinesound, it was a day of frenzy in covering every aspect of the meet. It was the one event of the year where there was no margin for error, either human or mechanical. In using 9 cameras, Movietone guarded against this, and throughout Australia, audiences expected to see the footage that night. When the horse race concluded, the race to get the footage to the cinemas began. Every year, Movietone beat its rivals by developing the film in flight on the way to Sydney, where it was dried and cut on arrival. Movietone had it on the screens by 7 o'clock. During the war, special flights took the footage to the front lines where for the troops it was eagerly awaited news from home. While Melbourne had its cup, Sydney had the harbour. By the mid-1920s, Sydney's primitive transport link across the harbour was overworked. The punts were carrying such a huge number of cars that to go to work was often a frustrating series of delays. The solution was the Colossus of the Southern Hemisphere.
We're building a bridge in Sydney over the harbour too.
And while the bridge united the city, it would also divide the community.
Long before the engineers drew the plans, or the labourer turned the sod, the people of Sydney dreamed about, worked for, and fought over the bridge which is about to be made available to them.
Lang had incensed the Royalists by choosing to open the bridge himself instead of the British Governor-General. Francis de Groot, leader of the right-wing New Guard, charged forward and cut the ribbon, declaring the bridge open in the name of decent citizens, a decision that would lead to one of the most famous newsreel scoops. As he was led off to jail, the footage was raced off to the cinemas, where it created such a volatile reaction, the Lang government had it removed.
Hear the tramping of the feet today, a holiday. Flags are flying everywhere, carnival is in the air, down old Sydney way. Bands are playing, here they come, listen to the big bass drum, listen to that here hooray. When the planes up in the sky fly above the span so high, they're opening the bridge today.
The uniqueness of the newsreel was that it could blend the factual with the entertaining. Audiences came to expect and savour items that were unusual. Entertainments from the dying world of vaudeville found rejuvenation through the new medium.
You like a smoke? Give me a kiss. Give me a kiss. Now throw it away.
And local characters became national characters.
The newsreel camera was at Middle Park to catch Bert Dean, a 28-years-old Melbourneite, shopping for his breakfast. First, a flagon of tasty salt water. Then a few flotsam-flavoured morsels from the beach, and hey presto, seaweed salad, garnished with a raw egg. And there goes the egg, shell and all. For 5 years, Bert stuck to his sea diet. Never been sick. Amazing. And he's a married man with a wife and 3 squids.
I would like to give a few demonstrations of what can be accomplished with the aid of an Australian stockwhip.
Leo Cracknell had an act tailor-made for movie tone. He could remove apples, flowers, cigarettes. Leo Cracknell came into his own with the swatting of flies, especially from the eyes. Camera news was news of action, and the rainy days of 1948 produced a scoop for the camera in a way no other medium of the time could match. Cyclonic rains left a Dutch submarine distressed in Sydney Harbour. Movietone was able to capture a lone sailor's desperate escape by swimming ashore. But perhaps the most compelling footage was of the Akron airship disaster of 1932. The American Navy was bringing it in for a routine landing in New Jersey. As gusty winds forced the airship skywards, 3 sailors failed to let go. After 2 hours of hanging on precariously, the 3rd sailor was hauled to safety.
It was a grand, glorious feeling to get inside once more.
Newsreel footage exposed the marriage of flight with danger. Early experiments with aviation tended to be more light-hearted and entered the realms of showbiz, for few could see it as ever being a serious form of transportation. For American escape artist Harry Houdini, it was a great source of publicity. Houdini stole the thunder of local aviators by laying claim to being the first to fly in Australia. But there was much local interest not only in inventions like the double propeller, but in those who had made landmark flights, like the intrepid Mrs. Hewlett.
I happened to be one of the first pilots, and I think the first pilot in Britain, and therefore I saw the very beginning. Going back to the comparison of 1910 to 1931, the great difference I must say, has been brought about by the war.
In 1914, the Great War darkened the whole of Europe. When Britain declared war, she expected the dominions of the empire to follow. In Australia, thousands volunteered in a massive demonstration of nationalism. Soldiers headed for the front line, marching off to foreign shores, singing songs of places they had never seen. The Labor Party was swept into office under the banner of patriotism. Said Prime Minister Andrew Fisher, "We'll fight to the last man and the last shilling." The forces from the young nations of both Australia and New Zealand were fully exploited by Britain, being thrown into the front line. Gallipoli exacted an enormous price. In bitter fighting over 8 months, nearly 30,000 Australians were either killed or wounded. Although at home newsreels turned their hands to propaganda, the reality was that numbers of volunteers were falling. New Conservative Prime Minister Billy Hughes supported the notion of conscription and forced people to vote on the issue, twice. Both times it was rejected, but the white feather, the symbol of cowardice, was still sent to any young man capable of fighting, but not in uniform. Someone who received the white feather was Les Darcy, Australia's heavyweight boxing champion. Although willing to join the army, he was forbidden by his mother. An enormously popular figure, he left the country in disgrace, condemned by the media for wanting to further his career in the United States. He died of septicemia shortly afterwards in his 20th year. Darcy, like many of his generation, returned home in a wooden box, and thousands turned out to give him a hero's funeral in Maitland. But people quickly forgot the war and entertainment flourished. There were few sounds more familiar in most country towns than the beating of the drum calling the desperate, the poor and the foolhardy to do battle with Jim Sharman's boys under the canvas of his famous boxing tent. But behind this mask of fun was the face of desperation. Massive unemployment between the wars spawned a nation of gamblers. If sixpence lay between starvation and a win on the whippets, then the flutter was a fair choice.
Give it a smile, get over the style and banish the budget blues. There's a tax on hats, a tax on boots, a tax on women's clothes, a tax on all the little things that only a married man knows. A tax on pictures, tax on punters when they back a winner.
The symbol of the goldsmith was well known in these years. Families hocked anything of gold, wedding rings, teeth and heirlooms, to provide the meagre necessities of life. A roof over your head, if you were lucky enough, and an evening meal of bread and dripping. But not all had to worry about what was on their plate. The Depression created two Australias, the haves and the have-nots. The newsreels of the time chronicled the ever-widening distance between the two. Going for a spin in the family jalopy often meant visiting someone with a wireless to share the deeds of the country's first media hero, Don Bradman.
Well, cricket to me seems just typical of the nation. It is the outstanding sport of the British Empire. Every Englishman enjoys his game of cricket, but when he speaks of playing cricket, he means something even greater than the game itself. He is exemplifying the spirit that stands for British sportsmanship.
But in 1932, the English cricket team discarded sportsmanship in an all-out assault to win back the Ashes. The English strategy was for the fast bowlers to aim at the Australian batsmen, with many being struck time and time again about the heart, the head and the back. The tensions on the cricket field made for cries for Australia to withdraw from the Empire. But when the dust had settled, England had won the Ashes. It was Bradman who led the next Australian tour to England, and the easy life on deck belied the effort it would take to win back the Ashes, due in no small part to Bradman's genius. While at home, an interested nation sat fixed in lounge rooms listening to what they thought to be live coverage.
I have been asked to explain to you how the synthetic ball-by-ball descriptions are broadcast by the national stations. Let us follow the course of a typical message as received in the Commission's Sydney studios only a minute after the actual happening on the test ground in England. This cable is taken down in duplicate and immediately amplified by cricket experts who fill in details regarding field placements on model cricket fields for the commentator.
Ames throws the ball back to Farnes. Farnes turns, runs in, volley to Bradman.
As the shot is made, the effects man, who has in front of him a copy of the cable message, drops the needle on an effects record, and listeners hear the applause of the crowd as the shot reaches the boundary.
Ball well pitched, Bradman moves forward, drives. Cotton at cover tries to cut it off, but is beaten by the pace of the ball, and it races away for another 4.
The wireless coverage of sport left an indelible mark on the minds of the young. Most kids wanted to be Bradman. But there was a simplicity in the love of being active that was determining the national character. This obsession with sport, combined with our love of the motor car, produced another type of hero.
I am leaving in a few moments to attempt to break a world land speed record, and I feel very confident of success. Here we are.
In 1931, Wizard moved at 164 miles per hour, making him the fastest man on land in the world.
Congratulations, Norm.
And when the two-way radio went into the motor car, for many the future seemed to have arrived.
VJA3 calling car AC310. AC310 reporting. Proceed to an accident in Macquarie Street near Bridge Street.
While the two-way radio saved lives, it also revolutionised news gathering. The camera teams could now be on the spot as human drama unfolded. When the movie-tone camera travelled into the sticks, it brought home to the city the strength and resolve of those who embraced the country life. But while this was an entertaining sideshow, the truth of inland life was less glamorous. Beside the phlegmatic, off-handed pioneers rode the Aboriginal drovers whose deeds were largely ignored, but who provided the backbone of the labour required to drive the large numbers of cattle along the arduous stock routes of the country's interior. The footage, too, showed how fragile, indifferent and callous the land could be. Wholesale disaster was never unexpected and served to remind us how unnatural our presence was and how little we really knew of the land. But sometimes the land grudgingly gave up its secrets. Gold. There was no more familiar a sight on the goldfields than the Chinese, whose successes created such resentment amongst European Australia that the results were often riots and massacre. True tolerance for such a foreign and exotic culture would take decades to come. Back on the surer footings of the fertile coastline, the national infatuation with fitness continued unabated. For Australians, the line between sport and religion was a blurry one. And when the Olympics went to Helsinki in 1952, some, like Marjorie Jackson, were more than ready. Marjorie had stepped out of the shadows of a coal mining city on the fringe of the Central West to conquer the world. The Lithgow Flash, as she was called, took out the gold medal in the 200 yards and the 100 yards dash in record-breaking times to be the fastest woman alive. Through the newsreel, Australia shared in Lithgow's pride and joined in the clamour of the 20,000 people who swarmed the main street of her city to welcome their champion home. Marjorie Jackson was one part of a long line of unique women Australians took to their hearts. Aeroplanes were never taken for granted, and those who flew them were larger than life. None more so than New Zealander Jean Batten, who in 1934 flew solo from London to Darwin, breaking the world record. The long flight between England and Australia was a deed of rarely matched heroism, serving to reinforce both technical advancement and the links with empire.
I want you all to know how pleased and how thrilled I am to be with you here in Sydney this afternoon.
What sort of weather did you have, on the whole?
I had some very, very bad weather in parts. I had very bad sandstorms in Syria and Mesopotamia. The heat in India was almost unbearable, being 140 degrees in the sun.
Did you
here.
carry any firearms, in case you came down in the jungle?
Pardon?
Did you carry any firearms, a revolver, or anything like that?
No firearms.
Well, there's something in that anyway. Wouldn't you have been frightened if you'd come down miles from anywhere? I suppose really you're not afraid of anything. How about mice?
But our best-known aviator was known by one name, Smithy.
Aussie is proud of you, proud it's true, of you and your gallant crew through the storm so terrific, flying o'er the Pacific.
Smithy began his career as a flying stuntman in early Australian movies and was the first to fly across the Pacific Ocean. While these flights were celebrated, his cavalier attitude to safety was his undoing. With comrade Bill Taylor, he attempted to provide a regular mail service between Australia and New Zealand. The first flight almost ended in tragedy when one of the engines was damaged. Bill Taylor clambered along the wing strut to remove the precious oil from the damaged engine. Using a thermos and a suitcase, he again left the cabin to top up the other engine that was overheating. Taylor repeatedly risked his life in this manner to keep the plane aloft. Any thought of getting the mail through was dismissed. It was jettisoned, and having turned around, the aim was simply a safe return. To the public, it simply reinforced Smithy's mystique. The hero had made it home again.
The Charles Kingford Smith is sitting up in the cockpit there, and the oil, you can see the oil on all parts of the plane. It's streamed all the way down and all over the other engine where they've been pouring it over them.
Smithy replaced his familiar Southern Cross with a new plane and set off chasing the speed record between Australia and England. But his luck was to run out. In 1935, Smithy disappeared over the Bay of Bengal. But often the drama of the newsreel gave way to fun. Like things to do with an Angora rabbit at the Royal Easter Show. By and large, people couldn't get enough of danger, and the feat of daring for 1944 was Mr. Morgan's casual jaunt around the new radio transmitting tower he had constructed. And while audiences gasped at Morgan's agility, they little appreciated the nerve of the movie-tone cameraman in bringing them the breathtaking pictures. But danger and news gathering often courted each other. When news came of impending natural disaster such as a flood in Wagga, there was no option but to be there, to record the endurance needed to survive the threat of catastrophe. And while in Wagga the work of the rural community had averted tragedy, no preparation could have halted nature's furious march through the New South Wales town of Maitland in 1955. The aftermath of the Hunter River breaking its banks was beyond all expectation. This was a national emergency. The newsreels depicted a people hopelessly unprepared, quickly replacing the desire to save possessions with the more desperate need to simply survive. In 6 days, the floodwaters had claimed 24 lives, 19 drowned and 5 electrocuted. The damages bill was over £2 million. Movie-tone cameramen Sid Wood and Mark MacDonald captured on celluloid the awesome force of natural disaster and the strength of the human spirit that defies it. By the late 1930s, Australian cities were gathering a momentum of their own, dominated by the now familiar sight of a crowded tram. The reliability of the tram got us to work and home in time to prepare for a night on the town. But all preparation was in vain, unless it was for Saturday night, the only night of the week. If there was nothing on at the pictures, then try the latest craze, ice skating.
Guys, how are you? Well. Look at this bunch. Look, fellas, how about a little number, a little song? A number that I heard in America. They tell me is very popular here. It's something about a bum walking along the road and he meets some dame named Matilda. All right? No dame? Yeah, it must mean something. All right, now look, let's start the singing. Let me see. Oh, you can do better than that. Let me hear you here. All right, now go.
Sydney's traffic can't take it when crowds jam Pitt Street to get a view of a pram, a baby and a nursemaid. Finally, the baby has to be carried over the heads of the crowd to seek refuge in a shop. What caused it all? For the explanation, we take you to a Sydney radio theatre for Bob Dyer's session, Can You Take It? The stunt was a penalty for a man failing to answer the question, what gets bigger the more you take out of it? The answer being a hole. But Bob pays off.
All right, Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Ray Mitchell, your penalty will be to wheel this pram with Rod Holmes along Pitt Street tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 from King to Market Street. If you do that, you will come back here next Monday and receive £50 for paying the penalty. Can you take it?
Yes.
He can take it! Just a moment. I'll have the baby say hello to the new nursemaid. Say hello to your new nursemaid.
Hello, Mercy.
There are other penalties, too. This girl, failing to answer a riddle, has the task of choosing the ripest of 3 melons to win a consolation prize. All the melons have got more hair than Bob Dyer. He's the one on the left.
Please. Now, don't forget, the melon you select, you can take home with you, right? Now, just over here, thump this one. And here's the second one. And there's the third one. Now, which one do you pick? The middle one! Now, wait a moment. There's only one way to find out. Here's a knife. Now, it's right on top of the melon. And now go when I count 3, cut. 1, 2, 3.
And for Sydney-siders, after church on a Sunday morning was Bondi, Australia's most famous beach and where all were equal. Here the well-dressed promenaded alongside the undressed, who wallowed in their love affair with the sand, sun and surf. But sun worshipping was not without its dangers, the most feared being shark attack in the years before the security of the shark net. The method of dealing with them was simple. Someone went out and caught them. Shark catchers like Jack Platt would alert the newsreels when the cry of shark went out, allowing the public insight into the dangers of what was a revered occupation. The Bondi way of life came to symbolise the Australian way of life. And when early American television featured the first program on Australia, this is what they saw.
Scenes at the seashore give us a clue to the kind of country Australia is. A paradise for water sport, here where the waves of the immense Southern Ocean sweep upon the Australian beaches.
Thank you, Lowell Thomas. As we look at this modern development in operation, the question of television's prospects in Australia comes to mind. Sir Ernest Fisk's opinion is,
it will revolutionize our home life, and the determination as to when it will start is in the hands of the Australian federal government.
The newsreels had often prophesied things to come, like early attempts to split the atom. And throughout the 30s, newsreels made more immediate predictions, the rise of European dictatorships. Militarism was on the march. Spain succumbed to fascist dictatorship. Japan seized Manchuria, and Hitler's armour prepared to slice its way through Europe.
The peace-loving nations must make a concerted effort in opposition to those violations of treaties and those ignorings of humane instincts, which today are creating a state of international anarchy, international instability, from which there is no escape through mere isolation or neutrality.
While Australia wasn't neutral, it was isolated from the events of the rest of the world. Having emerged from a decade of depression, people at home were keen to savour the good life. A sense of optimism and a more certain future allowed most to simply enjoy themselves. But inevitably, world events overtook us. On the 3rd of September 1939, Britain declared war on Nazi Germany. Within hours came the voice of Australia's Prime Minister, Robert Menzies.
Fellow Australians, it is my melancholy duty to inform you officially that in consequence of a persistence by Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war upon her, and that as a result, Australia is also at war.
I'm from Central Australia, and I've traveled about 2,000 miles to get here. Well, I don't think the other 12,000 miles to old Hitler will bother us very much.
Australia was caught woefully unprepared for another war. Training was primitive, makeshift and outdated, using weapons from World War I and a methodology totally unsuitable for modern warfare. While Australians were generally less enthusiastic to fight other people's wars than in 1914, the trip to Europe was quickly imbued with the naive spirit of adventure.
We'd like to leave this little song for you, the well-known artillery song.
Singing to roll-eye, roll-eye, roll-eye. Sing to roll-eye, roll-eye. For we are the Royal Artillery, and they pay us $1 a day.
On the home front, industries sprang into life, stealing the workforce for a total commitment to the war effort. Rationing was introduced, ensuring nothing was wasted and everything saved. The energy of the nation was directed towards supporting the front line.
In Queensland, the sizzling question was how to land the bacon, fresh and edible among the troops overseas. And this is how they sidestepped refrigeration. First, they boned and smoked it for 18 hours. Next, 2 wrappings of stockingettes. Then, of all things, a dunking in boiling bitumen, providing an airproof seal. 24 hours to cool off, another dunking, followed by a coat of varnish. And the bacon was ready to be shipped across the world for frontline breakfast menus.
The Australians arrived into the thick of the phony war. In the first months, the North African campaign was a holiday. But when action came, it was ferocious. Australian troops were again thrown into the front line, this time against the Italians in the deserts of Libya. These early victories against Mussolini's forces earned the diggers the title, the Rats of Tobruk. But the title exacted a heavy price, and each troopship returning brought home the reality of war.
Well, I did it today. Gave the boss notice.
What on earth for? I thought you were keen on the job.
Yes, I am. But I got an idea I'd like to join up the Army or the Air Force. They say they need women pretty badly.
Women's traditional subservient roles were suspended as they took over occupations formerly seen as unsuitable.
On target. Yes, 8,000.
In 1941, after the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan swept through Southeast Asia. The fall of Singapore brought home Australia's vulnerability. The war was suddenly on our doorstep.
Well, we'd been expecting a raid for quite a number of weeks, in fact. But when it came with a vengeance. It was a far bigger raid than ever we expected to experience in a little place like Darwin.
4 days after Singapore fell, Australia was attacked for the first time. Immediate Japanese invasion seemed certain.
Every human being in this country is now, whether he or she likes it, at the service of the government to work in the defence of Australia.
The defence of Australia meant the building of air raid shelters by the able-bodied.
That's the blue-tongued lizard. You cook him by putting him in clay. Put the clay in the fire, and then let it cook for about an hour or a little over, and out he comes, and he's very, very nice too. Now, I think we can have a look at these snails. There's one coming out. Those you have to boil. Those will cook for about 20 minutes to half an hour. And when they come out, of course, you can just pull them straight out and down the hatch. They're very good then.
Throughout the country, people's armies sprang up, learning the skills of guerrilla warfare, preparing to defend their own backyards from the Japanese. But the first to invade were the Yanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the greatest artists of all time, Bob Hope.
Thank you, General. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. He sounds like my agent. Isn't that nice? These boys have a rough time down here in these camps in these islands, Francis, but I still wish that I was one of them. Believe me. I really do.
Oh, seriously, Bob, I don't think you could take it.
You don't think I could take it?
No, you see, you have to forget all about fear.
Well, that's for me.
You have to forget all about comfort.
That's for me.
You have to forget all about women.
That's for them. Say,
The arrival of American troop ships at Australia's request, while at first being welcomed, was to cause resentment. They ate well, were paid well, and courted our women. While our boys courted mud, rations, and danger in the jungles of New Guinea. In late 1942, the Japanese army sustained its first defeat at the hands of the Australian and American troops. As the tide of war changed and the Japanese were pushed back along the Kokoda Trail, Movietone News cameramen risked their lives to be there. A few months after the surrender of Germany, the atomic destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki drew total Japanese capitulation. The First Pacific War was finally over. Amid the post-war euphoria, the American troops who had been with us for 3 years prepared to leave.
It's a wonderful combination, all for one and one for all. The eagle, the lion, and the kangaroo.
Here we are now. I've enjoyed my stay to the bitter. In fact, I've had a marvelous time. It's a bit of all right.
As the Yanks left with their Australian brides, we awaited the arrival of our new brides from overseas. After the long years of war, Australians were in a hurry to have fun. Australia returned to its winter love affair with the spectator sports. For Sydney, the Rugby League, mud-splattered gladiators seeking glory in a game from the English coalfields. And in Melbourne, Aussie Rules, Australia's only truly Indigenous game, combining Gaelic football, soccer and rugby, designed originally to keep cricketers fit in the off-season. By the late 1940s, people had time to consider the future, and the search for security was symbolised by the Aussie dream, owning your own home. The reality was, though, that for the last 15 years, the housing industry had been at a standstill. Materials were in short supply, and people scrounged for what they could get. When building started, it wasn't metropolitan. It was in the empty fields on the outskirts of every city, creating a new way of life, suburbia.
Keith Smith, who has a radio station, A Word from the Children, interviews youngsters in the street. Some of their remarks amuse their friends, but must amaze their parents.
Do you think that fathers should help mothers to do the housework?
Yes.
Why?
Because the mothers have to make the beds and wash up the dishes.
Doesn't father ever wash up the dishes at your house?
Yes, on Mother's Day he made the breakfast for Mother.
The post-war baby boom had begun. In the workforce, women were made to relinquish the equality they had enjoyed during the war and returned to traditional roles.
I'm very proud and terribly happy to have been chosen as Australia. It's such a shock. I really can't get over it. Thank you so much.
Do you make your own dresses?
Yes, I make most of them, but evening gowns are sometimes a little beyond me, and I design them and have them
Very
made.
clever. And did you design the one you've got on?
Yes, I did design this one, Miss Howard. Do you like it?
Oh, I think it's very pretty. Most becoming.
But the plans for Australia's dream future of a home, family and financial security required an immediate expansion of the workforce that had to come from overseas but be acceptable to our way of life.
The mission on which I am now embarking is vital to the nation. I am going abroad to seek ships for immigrants. If we have no ships, we shall get no immigrants. And without immigration, the future of the Australia we know will be both uneasy and brief. As a nation, we shall not survive. Give me the ships, and I will guarantee to load them with the right type of our future Australia.
I, then your name,
I, Jan Gurapuchek,
renounce my Czechoslovakian nationality
renounce my Czechoslovak nationality
and my allegiance to the Republic of Czechoslovakia.
and my allegiance to Republic Czechoslovakia.
And after taking the oath,
This, sir, is your certificate of naturalization.
now he's officially an Australian, and there's a word of welcome from the Prime Minister.
You'll have come to a country where democracy is not just a platitude, but something that is practiced.
In time, Australia may become like America, a new world aided by the crafts and traditions of the old.
The migration from Europe was massive, and while the skills of Australia's new citizens were welcome, we had no interest in the culture of the old. We embraced the style of the new, and the only model was America. Our stars were American stars. They were flash, brash, confident, rich, and the only measure of success.
Australian film star Anne Richards flew back from Hollywood to tell us about the stars.
I would like to tell you that I know Mr. Gable, and I've worked with Joseph Carton and also with Brian Donlevy and Randolph Scott, and they look very much, in fact, they look exactly the same as they do on the screen, and they're very charming people and very interesting people.
Instead of following Britain into war, we now followed America. The common enemy was no longer the Hun, but communism, both abroad and at home. At the beginning of the Cold War, the Menzies government attempted to ban the Communist Party of Australia. The Anti-Red Bill of 1951 was defeated by the narrowest of margins, but the newsreel footage exposed the political unrest that spilled onto the streets. Perhaps the most famous incident of the Cold War was the defection of Soviet spy Vladimir Petrov. But the most dramatic footage involved his wife, Evdokia. And while Petrov was kept in hiding by the Australian authorities, the Soviets attempted to take Mrs. Petrov back to Russia. There was doubt as to whether she was leaving by choice or through coercion. As they were about to board the plane, anti-communist demonstrators tried unsuccessfully to separate her from her escort. Later, as the plane refueled in Darwin, the Northern Territory Police removed her and she rejoined her husband. The irrational fears of the Cold War fueled the imagination of the military, keen to show us they'd entered the nuclear age. While terms like radiation and nuclear fallout had made their way into our everyday vocabulary, it was purely science fiction until the British started real nuclear testing on the Montebello Islands off the coast of Western Australia. While the political fallout from the Cold War ensured conservative rule, The fact that living standards rose to an all-time high guaranteed it. Sport, and more sport. So that in 1956, when the world came to Australia for the Olympic Games in Melbourne, success was expected. And success was to come. Homegrown champions like Murray Rose, Dawn Fraser and Lorraine Crapp became household names, but it was the feats of two women that captured the public imagination. One was Shirley Strickland. Strickland won gold in the hurdles, and Betty Cuthbert won 2 golds in the 200 metres and the blue ribbon event, the 100 metres dash. Success in sport made Australians feel good about themselves, and none more so than Betty Cuthbert, dubbed the Golden Girl of the Olympics, the greatest athlete of her day. But there were others who were championing triumph over adversity. Helen Keller, born profoundly deaf and blind, was an inspiration for those with few hopes.
It makes me proud to see how tirelessly you have overcome obstacles.
It makes me proud to see how you're overcoming difficulties.
I know every step on the road you are traveling.
I know every step of the road you are taking.
Obstacles you meet are many.
Because the obstacles you meet are many.
Strangely and adventurous.
And when you go out to life's struggles and adventures,
you will raise a banner.
You will raise a banner
who follow you.
For the deaf who follow you. Yes.
While science on the one hand was seeking new methods of destruction, on the other it was pioneering the elimination of diseases like polio and diphtheria, long thought to be incurable. Children of the 50s were the first to endure the fright of mass inoculation. But the 50s was also a time of profound social change and the rise of a new brash class of people, teenagers. Such was the country's wealth that for the first time youth enjoyed financial independence. Thus rock and roll from America and stunts like dance marathons. Teenagers across the Western world were linked by communications for the first time, so that fads that swept America quickly swept Australia. And a leisure industry was determining culture at a breathtaking rate. Australia began to sustain a living standard second to none, and disposable income bought anything from his and hers matching shorty pyjamas to all the trimmings of a suburban way of life. A whole nation succumbed to the irresistible voice of consumerism.
We find time for leisure because we rely on pie. You can cut the lawn in your Sunday best with a pie electric mower. Meanwhile, on the inside, Dolly's got the inside story on the Pie Rotovac, the vacuum cleaner with unequaled suction. Cleaning up, Dolly does a real cool job with our Pie Scrubber Polisher. Lend an ear, customers, and get a load of this.
Home entertainment flourished, and in 1956, the most important social change of the 20th century would happen in our lounge rooms. The television allowed us to disappear into suburbia. While some Australian entertainments made a successful transition to the new medium, for others it was their death knell. Going out on the town was no longer something we wanted to do. We forgot about the perm, what time the last tram went, or what hat to wear, but preferred to stay in the comfort of our own lounge rooms. Almost overnight, we stopped going to the flicks. And with the decline of the movie house, the newsreel was banished to irrelevance and memory forever.
Here we are on our way at last. Goodbye, Australia.
Here we are.
They pay us $1 a day.
Once again we say, well done, Jean Batten, Queen of the Skies.
And so, the comedy of fashion goes on.
Where the magpie chaffs and the kookaburra laughs, Australia is the land for me.